One of the things I like to do as part of a preventive maintenance regimen on all my vehicles is oil analysis, not only for the engine but also for the transmission and rear end, and this 95 F-250 is no exception. Currently have the coolant draining right now, and I'll go into some of the reasons why. The oil analysis report, ever since I got the vehicle, has been on the abnormal side, mainly due to coolant contamination, and that has gotten worse and worse, progressively worse, as the vehicle has aged, or as the engine has aged. We're starting to get a little bit more cylinder wear, camshaft wear, starting to, the bearing wear actually went down after switching over to a higher viscosity synthetic 10W40 oil, so it helped in that regard. But we're starting to get into the copper, a little bit more into the tin, so all these quantities here are bearing related and indicative that the bearings are being worn beyond just the lead outer layer. These are tri-metal bearings in these 351s. Most of the other stuff appears to be normal, but coolant contamination is just way out of hand, and that's one thing you don't want in your oil is coolant. It's just going to cause lots and lots of excessive wear and problems with viscosity. Fuel dilution is a little bit high in this particular case. Wintertime months where the engine's running a little bit more rich, and there's been a lot more short driving or short trips. The coolant is starting to affect, the coolant contamination is affecting the viscosity of the oil as well too, as you can see here. So we've got some problems with this engine, and the problems are only going to get worse unless they're addressed pretty soon, before the next winter time comes. So this is about mid-June today, and it's hard to start thinking about winter time, but actually it is coming up. And this is one of the very real benefits of paying the extra money to have your oil analyzed, is because you can head off major engine failures way before they actually become true failures, and you got to do some repairs, you know, head gaskets, put a new long block in there, all those kinds of things. So we're going to go ahead and drain the coolant now, and do some work on the motor where I think that the coolant leak is. And as you can see, right in there, right on the top of the timing chain cover where it meets the block, you can see some scale, that yellow scale developing. That's where one of the leaks is, at least one. And likewise on the other side there, on the top of the timing chain cover, there's some moisture. I knew about this all along because of the very first couple of analysis reports that I got. But rather than get into the engine this deep at first, I tried simply tightening mainly the two bolts that go through the water pump and through the timing chain cover, and tighten everything up. And indeed, they were extremely loose. Almost you could do it by hand. These bolts are very problematic on these Fords, the 302s and 351s, those two right there, as well as the two on the other side. They're very long, and they make contact with the coolant, and because of that they tend to corrode, and they almost always will snap off somewhere in the middle here where you can't reach it. And knowing that, while I had them out, I put a generous coating of anti-seize on them, so I'm not expecting there to be any kind of problem when I back these things out of here. So that should make this job a little bit easier. So basically what I'm going to have to do is, of course, drain the coolant, which I'm already starting to do right there. We're going to have to take out the upper and lower rad hoses, as well as the clutch cooling fan here, and the radiator shroud, and fan belt, and then crankshaft pulley and vibration damper, water pump, and then finally the timing chain cover. And hopefully that timing chain cover is not all eaten up where the gasket surfaces are and can be reused. If not, I'll have to replace those as well too. So let me go ahead and finish draining that coolant. I'm going to go ahead and reuse this coolant. So I've got a hose down there attached to the drain plug. You can kind of see it down there. Just trying to capture as much as I can. And the idea is to get the coolant drained low enough in the block so when you get the timing chain cover off, you don't drop a whole bunch of coolant into the oil pan and have to flush that all out as well. That just makes the job that much more complicated. So the trick to getting this fan out of here, because it rotates, is to go ahead and leave the belt on. And that way you've got the internal friction of the engine to hold it in place while you back these fasteners out. And then we'll go ahead and get the fan out of here. But first, let's get the rad hoses out of the way so we have enough clearance to tilt the fan and lift it out. Okay, now we've removed the air intake hoses as well as the plastic cover for the throttle body here. That's just 2 fasteners here and here, and of course regular hose clamps. Nothing really too difficult about that. These fans can be really tricky to get off, and I busted the bolts loose, no problem there. Sometimes the belt tension on here is just not enough to hold that thing still, and it can be very frustrating because the either the engine's going to rotate, or in my case the fan's going to rotate, rub against the belt. What you can do is you can take a long, thin wrench like this and just sort of wedge it like that against one of the bolts, and that's going to give you enough leverage to hold that thing still while you back all these things out of here. That makes the job a lot easier and a lot less frustrating. So we'll get these out of here and take off the hoses. By the way, I like using these original constant tension clamps. They actually are a little bit better than the aircraft style clamps because it prevents cold leaks, and this is the tool to do it. If you've got the right tool, it really makes getting these clamps off of here a piece of cake. So we'll carry on with that and get deeper into this thing. Okay, we got quite a few parts taken off of this thing, getting deeper and deeper into it. The crankshaft pulley just comes off with 4 bolts, and the water pump pulley comes off along with the fan. You may have to rock that fan back and forth a little bit just to get it off the shaft there. Sometimes it'll rust. And before I get too deep into this and start getting into the water pump timing chain and cover and everything, I like to get the vibration damper off, because that's usually the trouble spot that most people have. What really makes the job easier is to go ahead and use a 24 millimeter heavy duty impact socket and air gun. Even with this impact wrench on the maximum setting, took quite a few tries going back and forth to work the bolt loose, and it finally came out because they have RTV sealer on there to prevent leaks. That just makes it a little bit tougher. And what you want to do is, once you get the bolt all the way backed out, you want to put it in to give you something to press against as you back the vibration damper off with the steering wheel puller. That way you don't damage the crankshaft snout. And because the engine's going to want to rotate, just like with the cooling fan, you're going to have to find some kind of way to block this. I'm using a breaker bar, and just to stop the engine from rotating. And then you just go ahead and turn your wrench clockwise to back the vibration damper off. The large bolt on the crankshaft snout is a right-hand thread, so it just comes off counterclockwise. If you get stuck on a bind and you don't happen to have a impact wrench like that, what you could do is use that same socket and a breaker bar, I've done this before, and wedge that breaker bar against something like the frame, for example, right here, and then use the power of the battery and the starter motor and quickly crank the engine over in short pulses to work it loose. The immense leverage or mechanical advantage the starter motor has on the engine typically will get that bolt out of there. A less successful method is to take out the starter motor and wedge a screwdriver in there with the flywheel teeth against the transmission bell housing, and then use a breaker bar to get that bolt off of there. That typically doesn't work because once the engine rotates just ever so slightly, the screwdriver tends to fall out, and you got to crawl under there and do it again. So definitely the impact wrench is the way to go, but starter motor would be the next thing, and if not, the old screwdriver and the flywheel method will work sometimes as well too. So I'm going to go ahead and finish backing this thing out of here, and then we'll be able to take out the lower rad hose and the accessory brackets and get deeper into this thing. You can see while I'm doing this, you can see where the worst leak is right here, and to a lesser extent right in there you can kind of see some moisture. So these gaskets are just totally gone, and that's what I'm trying to replace. The gaskets here and here. This is really just going to be a resealing job, but there's obviously a lot to it. The engine's got to be taken apart quite a bit to get to all these things. Okay, the vibration damper came right on off. Took a little bit more force than usual. That thing's been on there for 20 years. And you can see why. This is a serious bolt. That's not coming out of there very easily. That's why you need the impact wrench or the help of the starter motor. And here's the vibration damper over here. There is a woodruff key in the crankshaft snout that you want to make sure is left in there and doesn't fall out. And basically you can see how these pulleys fit together. Sorry I'm not videoing each step of the process. It's about 92 degrees out here and same humidity, so trying to work pretty fast. So basically you would just, once you take the fan belt off, unloosen these 4 bolts, and this just, you'll have to rock this back and forth. It tends to rust between the vibration damper and crankshaft pulley. And these bolts, the engine doesn't typically tend to turn because they're kind of at an angle. And that just comes off. Here's some of the RTV that they used at the factory. And then you can just get to work on that main crankshaft bolt. Stick your puller in here and go ahead and pull it off. And you do have kind of a long ways to go, so just take your time with it. And it eventually will come off. Don't try to force it. So now, once you can get the fan out of here and also the vibration damper, you've basically done the most tricky parts of this job, the most difficult parts of this job. Now it's just going to be a matter of loosening the accessory brackets along with the accessories and setting them aside. Same with the alternator and air pump. And then just taking bolts off and getting the water pump out and eventually the timing chain cover. So the rest of the job, it's going to be time consuming, but should be fairly straightforward now that I have confidence that that vibration damper down there is not going to give me any trouble. You don't want to have gotten all the way this far and then have the vibration damper be the last thing you take out of here and discover you can't get it out. Then you've wasted a lot of time. That's why I like to do that pretty early on in the process, get the hard stuff out of the way, and then focus on getting some of the easier stuff out of here. Most of the stuff is fairly straightforward from here on out, so I'm not videoing every single step. I'd like to video every single step. It's just kind of hard to do when you're working alone and you're fighting the weather because of all the heat. But anyway, a lot of times these water pump thermostat housings get stuck on there pretty good with the RTV sealant that people use. And one good trick that I use is to take a block of wood and a long crowbar and not get crazy with it, but just put a little bit of force on this outer nipple here, and it'll bust on loose eventually. So it just makes it a lot easier than trying to use your hand and pull on the hoses, damaging the hoses and all that kind of stuff. The reason I'm taking out this thermostat is because I want to get the block drained down as much as I can, so I minimize the amount of coolant going into the oil pan. Hopefully prevent any coolant from going into the oil pan. And since the engine's cold, it's got kind of a vacuum seal on it right now. Even though I drain the coolant from the radiator, it can't suck in air through here to finish the drain process. So out she comes. Now here's the worst part about this job on these Ford 302s and 351s is 4 long bolts. One here, here, there, and there. They go all the way through the water pump housing and timing chain cover into the block, but this is a coolant passage as well too. That's what's causing the leak. So these bolts tend to get corroded right around there, and the shaft is weakened and they tend to shear off. I've known about these kinds of bolts on these Fords for a long time. So when I first got this truck, I anti-seized these threads, so we'll see how good of a job that did. I'll show you what I do to get these things out of here. You just have to be real careful and be gentle with it as you work on it. So we're going to take a long breaker bar with a long socket, of course. We'll fit it over there nice and snug, and we'll just kind of work that bolt back and forth, going a little bit farther each time. As soon as you feel resistance, you want to stop and just go back and forth like this. Kind of clean the thread as you go. This bolt here feels pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and spin that off with a ratchet. I think if it were going to shear off, it would have sheared off by now. It feels pretty solid to me. And it is backing out. I'm not just turning it around. If you've made it this far and you're trying to get these bolts out, these 4 bolts are the one thing that will stop you dead in your tracks and pretty much ruin your day, because you gotta either go to a junkyard to get replacements or go online. I'm not even sure if you can get these things online. Yeah, that's coming out nice and good. Time for the second one here. That NIC looks like it did the trick. This one's coming out by hand. That's what they look like. So it looks like I'll be okay. Let me go ahead and work on getting the remainder of those fasteners out. And then we'll work this water pump out of here. You can see just how dry and corroded these things get. This is the original 1995 water pump for this truck. You can tell by the gray color and consistent paint on the fasteners as well. So it's about time this thing came out of here. However, it is in good condition. Nice and smooth. No play. So I'll probably go ahead and reuse that guy once I get it out of here. I just need to see what kind of shape the impeller is in. And that date code, you can't see, but that is on a 5. So actually 1994. Original water pump. Kind of unusual, but going to use that nonetheless. Okay, the timing cover is off and everything is all cleaned up. One of the things you're going to have to do is pull the timing chain set out of here, which I already did, and take a razor blade of some sort, and it's just a very time consuming process, but you'll have to go around all these gasket mating surfaces and clean all the old gasket material off of there. And you'll want to wedge some paper towels down inside the front of the oil pan just to keep most of the debris from coming out of there. Same thing on the timing chain cover. I got it all cleaned up, scraped off all the old gasket material, and now this thing is ready to go back on. I also drove in a new seal, and basically you just tap around that with a hammer without damaging it to drive it in. And then on the back side, you can just take a screwdriver, get on that lip there, and drive it out. You could use a socket, but I don't have a socket that large. So this timing cover is ready to go back in. I put a new gasket piece on here, already pre-fitted that in here, and cut the old one out. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the original section of oil pan gasket here. It's nice and supple, it's silicone, still has a lot of life left in it, and that way I won't have to worry about these corners so much. I'll put a dab of RTV here and here when I go ahead and put it down, torque it down, and that should serve as a good seal. One of the surprising things I've learned about this engine is that it does have a factory installed true double roller timing chain. Usually I'll put those on as I do this job to replace the silent chain, but that's pretty encouraging. That makes this a pretty heavy-duty little engine. You don't often see factory installed double roller chains on these things. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to take some RTV silicone and we'll install the gasket on here and then begin putting this thing back together. It's interesting to note these are very old designed engines, big old cast iron block, cast iron head V8s, and this is a 1995 F-250, so you would think that all the parts are dated 1994, 1995. In actuality, this timing chain cover was actually made in 1976. Or maybe that is 94. Interesting, I thought that thing was made in 76 for a while. Alright, anyway, on with the reconstruction of this beast. Okay, now that we got a good solid bead of silicone sealer around there, it's time to put our first gasket on, and then once that's on, we'll have to do this all over again on the other gasket surface, and then this piece will be ready to go on. You want to make sure that you cover all the holes, especially where these things tend to leak, right around in that area as well. Okay, timing cover is all installed. Now I got the timing pointer reinstalled. Takes about 10 bolts. I'm not too happy with the way the gasket fits. It looks like it's made for a variety of different kinds of timing covers, but I can always trim that a little bit later. But we've got good bead around the whole perimeter of the cover, so I don't think this thing's going to leak. And now we got to start the process all over again and use these two gaskets here along with this cover plate and lots of RTV and goop this up and get the original water pump installed. I'm going with the original water pump because it's really in great condition. Hardly any cavitation erosion going on the impeller. The sealing surface looks okay. Not a lot of corrosion in the pump body or anything. And believe it or not, the OEM water pump is going to be a higher quality than the aftermarket ones anyway. So if I get 5 or 10 more years out of this, that would have been a good decision. So I'll go ahead and goop this stuff up and get this installed next. This truck is getting farther and farther along. Got the water pump all installed and gasketed it up. And man, I've forgotten how much of a job working on these small block Fords is. Basically tearing the whole front of the engine apart. Because you got gasket here, gasket there, and RTV sealant on both sides. So that's 6 different sides coated with RTV, plus a thermostat housing gasket coated with RTV. So needless to say, I used up an entire tube of sealant just to get to this point, but it's drying pretty good. All the bolts are torqued down to specifications and everything. And now I'm just working on the crankshaft vibration damper. And that's actually a lot easier to get on than it is to get off. To get off, you got to have a special puller similar to this one. This is a nice one. Mac Tools. Can't go wrong with that. But to get it on, you just basically lubricate the outer surface so it doesn't rub against the new crankshaft seal, and you tighten down the bolt. And most of these bolts you could just go to your, tighten them up good and snug. But in this case, some cases you do want to have a definite torque on here, and the torque specification calls for 90 foot-pounds because you don't want this bolt backing off and the vibration damper coming loose. And it's between 70 to 90 foot-pounds. I like to err on the high side of that. So I got my torque wrench here, and unlike getting the thing off, where you could just use an impact wrench and zap it off of there, you should not use an impact wrench to get it on, for a variety of reasons. But to hold this thing loose, which you can hold this thing tight to keep it from rotating, what you can do is put these bolts back in that hold the crankshaft pulley in place, and just wedge a wrench up in there and let it rest against the water pump housing. Turn the wrench this way so you've got a lot more strength, and that'll hold the engine still while you go ahead and tighten it. So just a little trick to avoid frustration. I'll do a similar technique to get these fan bolts tightened down as well too. But this is I've forgotten how time consuming this job really is, and most of the time is spent preparing all these surfaces for reinstallation, scraping all the old gasket material off. You can see just how many gaskets there are on this thing. That took hours and hours just to scrape all that stuff off. Would have been a little bit quicker if I had just gotten a brand new water pump, but there's nothing wrong with this water pump. It's not leaking, it's real smooth, so went ahead and reused it. But just a time-consuming job. Be prepared to spend all day on it when you're doing this yourself. If it's just a water pump, it won't take nearly as long, but I had a good old-fashioned leak right there, which I think is pretty typical on these small blocks, so I basically just had to tear it apart and do a reseal on it. But anyway, I'm going to get this thing back together and leave it sit for 24 hours. The bad stuff about this RTV is it takes a long time to dry, so I can't put coolant in here until that's all nice and dry. It's dry on the outside, but still pretty tacky on the inside, I'm sure. Well, I'm happy to report that this whole job is finished now. I'm just warming up the engine to top off the coolant. I was able to use most of the coolant that came out of it, and is topping it off with extra that might have dripped on the ground. And also we'll be able to check for leaks and everything. So hopefully just those two areas are the only leaks that I have. There could be a possibility that I've got a leak between the lower intake manifold and head, but I won't know that until I run another oil analysis report. And I can't overstress the value of this, of the oil analysis. That's the only reason I'm doing this repair. The engine oil in this truck has always looked okay, smelled okay. The engine ran fine, nothing wrong with that. So other than the analysis report, you would never suspect anything wrong. It did have puddles of coolant on top of the timing chain cover, but usually no big deal, and most people would think that's no big deal, but it's actually what was occurring inside, behind that timing chain cover, that was almost going to kill the engine. And the engine, don't get me wrong, this engine is still in very good mechanical condition. These numbers are flagged red and they seem high, but these numbers, these tests are extremely sensitive. So, you know, way before you get any water in the oil or anything like that, or start to hear noises, these analysis reports are going to let you know well ahead of time to start looking at potential trouble. Whether you've got excessive wear going on, or coolant contamination, or fuel dilution, any of those kinds of things. So I did change the oil as part of the process for doing this job, just because bits and pieces of the gasket tend to fall into the front part of the oil pan. So I'm kind of starting with a clean slate, and at about another 3,000 miles we'll run another analysis report, and we'll see if this number here in particular, the potassium, goes on down to normal levels, back what it was before. So this is a preemptive measure to avoid any long-term engine damage. This truck is a 1995 model. It's got about 156,000 miles on it. And eventually what would have happened is that coolant contamination would have formed hard crystalline structures, kind of like, for lack of a better word, gout, if you ever had gout. It gets in between the bearings and chews the bearings up. And that's what causes the elevated copper, lead, and tin wear for the steel back babbitt bearings, or tri-metal bearings, that Ford uses in this engine. And most of the time, you know, with that kind of mileage, most people would think, well, the engine's just too tired. You know, you'll start hearing a rod knock, and the engine will finally let go eventually, and you'll never know the root cause. So hopefully I've gotten a lot more life out of this engine by doing this repair. It is pretty involved if you want to do this yourself, doing it all at once, the timing chain cover and water pump. So be prepared to spend basically 8 hours on one day to do the actual job, and then you got to wait overnight for the RTV to set up, and then like today on the second day, go ahead and top off your coolant and check for leaks. So hopefully this video has been helpful to you guys. I haven't documented every single step of the process just because it is a very time-consuming, tedious job, mainly to scrape away all the old gasket material and everything, but I tried to go over some of the main highlights and some of the gotchas, like getting rid of some of those bolts on the cooling fan, as well as the vibration damper, how to hold the engine still. And this is a very common problem on the Ford 302s and 351s. The gaskets eventually start getting hard and cracked, and they go bad. And when they go bad, they start contaminating these long water pump bolts that go through here. There's two on that side and two on the other side. Once they get corroded, they get weaker, and when you try to undo the bolt, they just snap off into the block somewhere. So that's one thing to be wary of with these older Ford small blocks. I would even go so far as to say, as a preventive maintenance measure, every year when you change your coolant, go ahead and back out those two bolts on that side and that side, back them all the way out, clean them up, chase the threads with a tap and die set, put some anti-seize on them and put them back in. You do that, you won't have to worry about snapping them off. I did just that in this case, and I was very fortunate I was able to do this whole job without any unforeseen gotchas.